Why hello everyone, Avid Assistant here, and welcome to this video where we'll take a look at the Avid's first release of Media Composer of 2024, Media Composer 2024.2. Let's take a look. Right now, as always with these videos on the Avid updates, I will remind everyone to recreate your user settings. You'll see here I have already done that. And the fastest way to do this is just to create your new user profile, and then with the settings window open, use Command O or Control O if you're on Windows, navigate to your old settings, there's mine here, go into them, select the XML, hit open, and you'll get a window with all of your old settings, and you can drag and drop things like your keyboard over. Now the only thing I ever recommend dragging over here is your keyboard, since things in the other settings do tend to change. And this is what tends to guarantee the most bug-free behavior for me, at least in my experience. But if you feel like trying some other stuff, you know, like bin views or export settings or something like that that's quite precious to you and you don't want to try rebuilding again, have at it, and then if you have issues, just rebuild your settings again and copy the keyboard. Right, now the other little housekeeping thing to point out here before we get into the nuts and bolts of features of the new version is that as of 2024.2, Avid is no longer providing support for macOS Catalina or macOS Big Sur. So if you are on those versions of macOS, if you're a Mac user, you're on those versions, 2024.2 is not officially supported in anything going forward. It won't be tested on those versions. There won't be bug fixes and releases to cater to those versions. So you may want to think about either sticking on the version you're on or upgrading your OS. And now that that's out of the way, let's get to looking at some of the more interesting stuff. Now, I will say straight out of the gate, this is more a sort of quality of life improvements. There is a few really nice features, but unlike some of the previous early year releases of Avid, this is not a major release with a whole bunch of new features and new things happening. The rumor mill is that kind of release we can expect more around the mid-year, around June time. This release is more like taking some features that have more recently been added to Avid and improving them, from customer feedback and support and things that have been asked for, and factoring those into Media Composer. Starting with the new Transcript feature. So as of recent versions of Avid, we got the ability to right-click on any clip and go Transcript and create script from clip. So we'd automatically be able to create a script bin with a populated script and script sync it, and we would automatically be able to export out a very basic text file with a transcript of what was said in that clip. Very, very nice and appreciated, but quite limited in scope as to what you could do with that. And the obvious request that came as a result of adding this feature, where can we have things like this on sequences as opposed to just clips? And can we have, it automatically generate subtitles? Well, now we can. So you'll notice now that if you right click on a sequence, I've prepared 3 small sequences here so I can, more easily time this out. Now, of course, I have already exported these scripts and tested it out, and so I already know what's going to happen, but for the purposes of you seeing how long this takes, this will be a useful process. So if I right click on any of these sequences now, there is a new submenu called Transcript, which has 3 options, and these will be grayed out or white depending on whether you're right-clicking on a script or a sequence. So when we do this on a sequence, the only one that's grayed out is create a script from a clip. So we can't make a script bin out of the sequence, but we can export a transcript, and we can now export a subcap. Meaning we could export a subcap file, which we could then import back in to a subcap effect on that sequence to automatically generate captions and subtitles. So first off, I'll demonstrate exporting out the transcript file, exporting out the text file, since we have some new things there as well. So transcript, export, transcript. And you'll see when I do that, I'll get a pop-up box asking me to select which tracks. Now this is a really nice bit of foresight here of whoever's developed this, in the sense that I can select just my dialogue tracks and tell it to ignore the audio that is on my music and sound effects tracks, since they might get in the way of the AI code running this and trying to create the transcription. especially if you have, maybe a music track under there that has dialogue in it. So I have all my tracks named here since this is an old project that was named and prepped for, going to online. So I'll just select all my dialogue tracks, A1 through 6, and then hit OK. It'll ask me where I want to save this, so I'll just jump to where I want to do that. Then I'll hit save, and we'll see how long this takes. Bearing in mind, this is a 50-second sequence. Right, so as it starts, the estimated time keeps going up and up. But then, as soon as it's, got an idea of what it's doing, it instantly goes down. And now it's settled on about 15 seconds. Which was bang on right. About 18, 19 seconds total it took. Right, so this is our transcript opened up in text edit here. This is what it'll look like. So we get 2 lines at the top saying the project this is exported from and clip name. So I think it means sequence name, so just the name of whatever this was exported out from. But what you'll notice what's new from exporting the transcript from clip that we had previously is we now have a little donation of who's speaking. So we'll have speaker 1 and speaker 2. And then if there was a third person, speaker 3. Allowing you to then just run a find and replace on speaker 1, and you could rename it as per the character, and then you would have a full transcript accurate with the name of the character speaking and all their dialogue. Excellent, right? Now I will say that I have tested this feature on 3 different projects, on 5 different sequences now, 5 different scenes, and whilst I found the transcription of the dialogue to be generally very accurate, the 1 or 2 slip-ups it's had is when they've been talking over each other, which I can kind of understand. The identification of the speakers I haven't found to be the most accurate. Now in this particular project, I figured that might be a result of this being a Scottish short film, and there are scenes of 2 Scottish males talking to each other. Very similar accent, very similar ways of the sound coming out, and maybe the AI isn't just learned enough for that yet, and it can't distinguish between the 2. But while I can't show you the transcripts of the other stuff, I have tested it on scenes from the more commercial projects that I'm working on with more American accents, and haven't had much better luck, to be honest. I've also found it to be not entirely consistent, since I've exported it from the exact same sequence a couple of times and had slightly different results of when it IDs the speaker. Now, I imagine that with this being the very first Avid release with this feature, this will definitely get better over time. This is its first outing, it's learning, and it'll probably learn through users using it. It's a much different environment than in a development lab, or I don't know exactly what you call that environment, in a development space. You know what I mean? The software being in the hands of countless editors all around the world will be much better practice for it, and I'm sure it will get much better. But for now, while I would definitely recommend using this feature, by all means, it's really great, particularly with the dialogue transcription. I wouldn't rely on the speaker identification just yet. But I will say it's a very, very nice feature though. I love that that was thought of, and once it's tweaked and once it's more reliable, I will be using that on a regular basis because that is really nice. But what about the export subcap feature with the automatic captions? Since that's probably something that people are a bit more excited about. Well, let's test that one. Right, so here we've got a scene from that same short film, sort of an interrogation scene. Our main character here of Jerry is tied up at this tree, and he's being interrogated by the big scary Calm. So let's imagine that we really needed some subtitles for this, and let's face it, with Scottish and Northern Irish characters here, there's a good chance that we probably would need subtitles for this at some point. So I'm going to right click on the sequence, transcript, export subcap, and then I'm going to toggle the all none button and just tick the dialogue tracks. Probably only need the first 4 actually, because that's all that's being used. Hit OK, and then I'll export that out to, well, just to the same place. Now I will drop the subcap effect onto my timeline. Then in the effect editor, I'll just go caption files and import caption data. Then we navigate to our file that we just exported and hit open. And voila. So just a moment, I'm going to put these in a bit more of a logical place other than super tiny up in the top left.
A wee minute later.
There we go, that's much better. Now thankfully with subcap we can edit global properties, so we can edit all of the instances of subcap across the timeline just by tweaking one of them. So I was able to very quickly reformat all of these. So I'm going to change this to a single composer window just so you can see it easier. And so you can see now that we do have captions and we're able to generate that very quickly. Now, again, this is still kind of a first generation feature for Avid at least. And so it will still need some tweaking, but 90% of the work is done for us. All that's left to do is watch it down and check it in QC, which really as editors we should be doing all the time anyway. For example, we hear Columns talking to Jerry and he calls him Jer, not Jar. This line is actually two lines, and one spoken by one character and one spoken by another. And adding in little punctuation, like the odd question mark. But all in all, it is drastically speeding up the process. Things just need checked and tweaked rather than, built from scratch. And I wouldn't say that a lot of the other automatic transcription services that you see online or on other platforms are necessarily that much better, since I see auto caption videos on YouTube with incorrect captions every single day. Every single day. And as someone who gets bothered by incorrect uses of there, and there, yes, I notice it all the time. It's everywhere. But for the first iteration of this in Avid, it's working very well. And you can see they are investing in improving the service, since now that same transcription engine that we were using just on clips before, they're trying to give us speaker IDs, we can now use it on sequences, and we can use it to automatically create subcaps. So those are huge improvements, which will only get better over time. So thank you very much, Avid. Greatly appreciated. Right now, before we move on, I just want to mention that there's also been a couple of other little background improvements made there, with the first one of those being that now under your project settings, there is a transcript option. And in there, you can specifically set your language for the transcription indexing that Avid's doing. Now, by default, this is set to multilingual, and this will arguably give you your best results, since Avid is able to automatically transcribe with a mixture of languages being present in the sequence or clip. But if you are having issues where Avid's transcribing into another language or it's presenting words incorrectly, try coming down here and under the drop-down menu specifically setting the language that you want to use for your transcriptions. Now, note that the first time you do this, you will get a warning pop up saying that this may cause issues with the accuracy of the transcribing, and this is just a default warning. It'll happen the first time that you change the language setting in that project. Don't worry about it too much. If you're already having issues, this is what you're supposed to be doing and changing it. It's just a warning that you're changing away from the default. The main thing to be aware of here is that Avid will most likely be rebuilding the entire transcription index in the background every time you change the language here, so just bear that in mind. And the other little back-end improvement that's been made to this feature here is the transcription indexes that Avid's creating here, the libraries of all the transcriptions that it's doing, can now be shared between projects. So it's now more about the media. So if Avid's transcribed a bunch of media and then you move to another project, say if you have an assistant project and an editor project for the same production, the same feature film or TV series, it won't have to do that indexing multiple times. It will remember that as the same media and you already have all that indexed and transcribed in the background somewhere. So less doubling up on hardware resources. And speaking of, as a little sidebar, I have found on this version it to be a little less demanding. On some previous versions, I had to disable the PhraseFind AI indexing because it was a little too machine resource hungry. And I found my internal temperatures shooting up way high and not coming down, but not had that issue at all on this version. So, yay, very nice. Right now, moving on from the whole AI transcribing area here, The other main feature that's been added here, which is just something that's so nice and is going to save so much time, a really little, little minor thing, but it's going to save so much time, and I wish to God this had been added years ago, is the ability to have your audio tracks automatically named by what they are. So a very common workflow for me is to have a whole load of synced subclips in a scene bin that only have one audio track, the audio track of the mix track. And generally speaking, that's what I will cut with. And I will only go to the source ISOs if I need more tracks, like if I need it, if there's something not clear on the mix and I want to boost, a dialogue of someone talking, or if I'm looking for clear dialogue of just one character or something like that. And that process will look something like match framing on the clip, then deselecting the video, match framing again, and I've now got the source audio clip lined up in my source monitor. But at that point, what I normally do is I then go find bin as well to open up the bin where the source is, extend the bin, and look all the way to the right, and I can see what's on all of them. So track 1's the mix, then boom, boom, radio A and radio B. Then you think of which one it is that you want, and I'll go back to my timeline and I'll patch that track in. Now just imagine having these names, this data here of, what's on each track, each ISO, in the track names here in the source monitor. It would mean I would never need to open up this bin. It'd just be a simple double tap on my match frame to get to the source audio tracks and then patching in what I need. Well, we can now do this really, really easily. If we come down to the fast menu here in the timeline, we now have this option here of show source track names. And it does exactly what it sounds like. Click on it there and boom. It automatically names each track for what it is, as long as there is some kind of data populated in the bin of what kind of track it is. So under here, like track 1, 2, even if it's formatted slightly differently, Avid has taken into account all the most popular sound recording devices and how they tend to name these metadata columns, and it will look for these and it can feed that information straight into the track name. And we can also now edit this information in the bin. So if you were using a sound recorder that didn't populate this information, we could just bring up a saved bin view and use bulk edit to populate all of that information very, very quickly straight from the sound logs. And then we would still have access to that information, even if the sound recordist wasn't able to give it to us as metadata. Honestly, within the past month, I had 2 different people reach out to me and ask if there was a way to do this in Avid, a way to very quickly populate this data into the ISO names, since they were assisting for editors who like to have all the channels on their subclips and they wanted them all named. And they were going one by one per track, per clip, and right-click renaming them. So this exact feature, if they're able to go to this version of Avid in the near future, will save them tons and tons of time. Plus, as you can see, you can do this on existing projects, on older projects. It doesn't have to have been made in this version or the audio imported with this version. It just has to have that metadata, and since almost all production sound does have it anyway, it's very, very simple. The only thing to note about this feature is that if you manually right-click and rename any of these tracks, then that manual naming will take precedence. So if your assistant editor or the editor has manually renamed any of the clips tracks, then that will take primary precedence. Right now, the last feature that's been added in this version isn't really something that I can demonstrate since it's Windows only, and as you can see, I'm on a Mac system, but I'll do my best to describe it to you. So you may or may not be familiar with a new system called OpenTimeline IO, which has been showing up in several different NLEs in the last year, and there has been a lot of development and work gone into this to make exchanging timelines between different editing applications and VFX applications and things like this. When you come to online, you're sending timelines to different places to make all these different applications more interchangeable and to make that whole process a bit more friendly. A lot of large studios like Netflix and Disney have been very keen on this, endeavor. And so a lot of resources have went into it. And so there is now a public preview in Avid Media Composer of OpenTimeline IO. It will export a text file. Think of the 2024 version of an EDL of a timeline that you can then ingest elsewhere, or even just use that text file to extract data about that timeline and about the clips on that timeline. If you are on a Windows machine and you're on this version, the way to export one of these things is to go to the File menu, Output, and use the Send To function. Within the Send To function, just make a new template and then create a linked AEF setting and export. You should end up with a file that has a .otio file extension at the end, open timeline IO, and please let me know how you fare. As I said, it isn't a feature that I can test on my system, so I'm quite interested to see what that looks like and what kind of data is shown in that text file. So yeah, let me know how you get on. But in terms of new features for this release, that's pretty much us. That's pretty much us all wrapped up. Now, of course, we also have the bug fixes, the most notable of which that I noticed was fixing the source browser, retaining its size in between restarting Avid and in between calling up that window. So that was appreciated. There's also been a number of fixes on things to do with font sizes, color LUTs, importing ALEs that had too many characters, all kinds of different things. We've got almost 2 full pages of bug fixes there. Plus, there's also a whole section in Avid's README doc, which is available on their website when you download this version, detailing known bugs and limitations in this version, as well as, where possible, suggested workarounds to, fix the problem. And that's all from me, folks, on this version of Avid 2024.2. I will say once again, please create new user settings. That is always strongly recommended on each new version of Avid. I will also strongly suggest that you uninstall the current version and then install this one manually with the installer downloaded from Avid. Now, I know this is technically not as necessary now since Avid Link has had a lot of improvements over the years and you're supposed to just be able to click to install the new version there. But trust me, a cleaner install just makes, the whole world a happier place. And the new version will just settle in much nicer into your system. It is strongly recommended. I do it every time. For a full list of suggestions on, protocols around updating Avid, you can check out the old video on the topic that I did, which is in the video description. But as for this video, I think that's us, all wrapped up. Thank you very much for watching, especially YouTube members on Patreon members. And I will see you next time in the next video, whatever that one may be about. At this time, I really don't know. Could be on anything, really. I mean, probably Avid related, but anything within that particular niche topic.